During the late 1800s, European immigrants began to pour into the United States, many of which came for economic, religious, and social opportunities. Others came to look for work in America's expanding industrial industries. Upon arrival, most immigrants settled into cities like New York and Chicago. Unfortunately, almost all of the immigrants were poor, and by 1910, they began to overcrowd American cities, primarily the slum areas. This caused a rapid increase in the unemployment rate and a sharp incline on the number of homeless people on the streets. In the 1920s, President Roosevelt's Public Works Administration began to take interest into the overcrowded slum areas. In 1932, Congress decided to take action by creating the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, or RFC. This act authorized loans to private companies providing housing for low-income families. However, this did very little to help the growing number of homeless people. Due to this, the Housing Act of 1937 was established. It was considered to be the official creation of public housing. This act authorized loans to local public housing agencies for public housing construction expenses. In the same year, the Chicago Housing Authority was established. The first homes built were the James Adams Home, which were on the near west side, the Julius C. Lathrop Homes, which were on the north side, and the Trumbull Park Homes, which were on the far south side, all of which were supposed to be built to provide housing for low-income families. However, the units of these homes were given to white families. During World War II, CHA had been redirected to create housing for workers in the war industries. One project, Altair Gardens, built in Riverdale, was built exclusively for black war workers. Two other large projects built only had some units for blacks. After World War II, CHA had begun to provide units for veterans. When black vets overcrowded projects assigned for them, CHA sometimes placed them in projects built for whites and vice versa. This often caused white-black confrontations. Sometimes racial slurs were said, and other times situations turned violent. Many people in CHA housing felt as though they were abandoning the neighborhood composition rule. This required that tenants in the housing development be of the same race as the people of the area in which it was located. Not only did people begin to grow frustrated with the fact that CHA did not stick to providing housing solely for poor families, but also they felt as though they contributed to Chicago's already growing segregation. In 1949, Congress passed another Housing Act. This act provided substantial funding to public housing. Funds for open space land and basic water and sewer facilities were granted as well. CHA had already been ready with a map proposal for projects to be built on open land throughout the city. This proposal, however, would not go as planned. White aldermen rejected public housing being built in their wards. Whites living in proposed neighborhoods rejected plans as well. CHA then changed their policy to build housing only in black residential areas or adjacent to existing projects. For example, CHA acquired land in the Little Hale neighborhood to build the Cabrini Green homes. After this experience, CHA never again proposed clearing a settled white neighborhood. Also, by 1950, Chicago aldermen rejected suburban-style development because of fear that African Americans will move to the outer reaches of Chicago. Many people see this as the reason why there has been a high density of blacks and public housing on the city's south and west sides. CHA oftentimes went to extreme measures to keep African Americans from certain areas. To block westward movement of African Americans into Daley's home, for example, Bridgeport Expressway and the 18-tower housing project served as a wall of segregation. Not only did CHA build housing to segregate African Americans, they also allowed the public housing buildings to rapidly deteriorate. Most buildings were badly flawed and were horribly maintained. CHA also stopped screening applicants trying to get housing. By the late 1950s, it became obvious that there were serious problems in the high-rise projects. CHA still continued to build projects in black districts. In 1966, in the case of Guthrie versus Chicago Housing Authority, a group of tenants sued CHA for perpetrating racial segregation in Chicago by setting projects in the ghetto. A federal judge ordered the agency to build scattered site housing throughout the city. Thereafter, the authority only built a handful of scattered city dwellings, which was only to house elderly tenants. These homes could be built in white sections of the city. The Chicago Housing Authority continued to neglect its buildings and allow them to become damaged. Many people argued that thousands of blacks were forced to live in crime-ridden, rat-infested concentration camps. In the 1970s, CHA's housing development would experience a down spiral change. The 70s is the time where Chicago gangs became more organized and dominant on the streets. Most gang lords started their organizations through housing projects. Being that there was a high population of blacks in one area, it was not hard for leaders to find new recruits. By the 1980s, high concentrations of poverty and neglected infrastructure were severe in the housing projects. It had become evident that CHA had begun to lose control of what they had built. This made it even easier for gangs to take authority over the projects. Leaders like David Barksdale, who founded the Black Disciples, and Larry Hoover, who founded the Gangster Disciples, which was notorious for running Cabrini Green, both dominated a housing project. Residents who lived in the projects said that they decided who came and who went. Sometimes, gangs charged people tolls to enter and leave the buildings, and enforcing curfews so residents wouldn't disturb drug trades. CHA's only known solutions to these problems was only to get the police involved and to enforce sweeps. Gang members usually moved to other buildings to avoid these sweeps, causing more people to become hostage of the gangs. For example, the Rockwell Garden Project that was on the city's west side had sweeps that led to warfare between rival gangs. The police and the CHA had very little to no control over dominating gangs in the developments. In the end, CHA did not stick to providing housing for low-income families. They added on to Chicago's already segregated city, and they also allowed gangs to run the developments that they had built.